Okay, question 2 is the language question. This is looking at the Tightrope Walk over Niagara Falls, paper 2. So the question is, how does the writer show that Nick Wallender's tightrope walk was astonishing and dramatic? You should comment on what he says, his use of language, and basically anything else that you pick up on that shows it was astonishing and dramatic. So in this question, you're looking to make 5 or 6 quotes. What are the marks given for? Clear points, clear explanations. What we want to avoid is waffling or big PE. So we prefer to look at quite a lot of quotes. So we prefer 6 or 7 small PEs as opposed to just 2 PEs that are huge. Okay, question 2 is that always going to be there in the exam. Okay, so it's a 10-mark question. So you're looking at 13 to 15 minutes and looking to make basically as many quotes as you can in that time. So terminology is not needed on every point. Leave it if you're not sure. A lot of people get obsessed with similes and adjectives and verbs and alliteration and statistics. Don't get obsessed with it. Maybe if you're doing 5 or 6 quotes, maybe on 1 or 2 of the quotes you can talk about it. But generally, you're going to get your marks for just explaining why the writer has used that language. So you need to use a range of quotes, like I say, from the beginning, middle and end of the extract. So what I mean by that is, if we're doing 7 or 8 quotes, we don't want them just like this, all from one part. It says in the examiner report 8 or 9 times they want coverage from all over the text. If we don't want it like this, we like it like this. So all over the text, to show the examiner you've read the start, middle and end of the extract. Try to write your answers from top to bottom. So what I mean by that is, if we go back to this, try to write your first PE on the first bit and your last PE on the last bit. Try to make it sense, chronological order. So in this question, you're analysing the writer's use of language and basically saying, what does analyse mean? Well, we're examining in detail, why has the writer decided to use that word? So we're going to comment on the effect of words and how they make the reader feel. So what emotions are the reader meant to get from the words that have been written? So let's look at an example question. How does the writer make the weather seem scary to the boy with the quote, "The rain thumped against the window"? So we're going to look at that quote and say, how does it meant to look scary to the boy? So we're looking where a writer deliberately uses words. So we're going to look at why the writer has chosen to use the verb thumped. Okay? So we're going to zoom in on the word thumped. Go back to this question. So the writer could have said, the rain tapped on the window, the rain touched the window, but the writer's purposely chosen to use that word thumped. If it did say the wreck tapped against his window, this is probably, that's what a tap is, isn't it? So it's nice and soft, no big deal, not aggressive. Yeah, it's a very sort of, very almost like quite a slow, quite a gentle thing a tap would be. But the writer hasn't chosen to do that. And if we're thinking about rain, this is the kind of tapping the gentle rain would maybe cause. But the writer's chosen, he hasn't used the word thumped, he's chosen the word thumped. So what does thumped mean? Let's analyse the word thumped. Why has the writer chosen? What image do we get? We get this sort of image with thumped, don't we? So completely opposite to the other one, we get an aggression, a violence to do with the word thumped. Yeah? Like again, power, aggression, violence, and again, if the rain thumped, it'd probably be like this, or even harder than this rain, probably would be even more extreme than this rain. So if we think of the word thumped, what do we think about? So we think about these things, but let's put that, those are the images. What words, what connotations does the word thumped have? So I would say the words that I would link to the word thumped are power, aggression, anger, strength or strong, punishing, force. All I've done here is the bigger words are the ones that really associate to me, and the weaker ones are maybe the ones that I don't associate as much, but still have some sort of link to the word thumped. Okay, so we're looking for 3 things in this question. What does the writer say in the text? What method does he use? And what's the effect on the reader? So I would say an example sentence. This isn't particularly a great sentence, but it's a sentence maybe that you would use in the exam. It certainly would get you sort of grade 4, grade 5, grade 6. And very simply, the use of the verb thump suggests the storm seems strong, angry and punishing to the boy. Okay, so the word thumped is saying that's what the rain is doing. It's suggesting the rain has strength, that it's angry, that it's punishing. That's what's making the boy scared. Again, I don't have to use the word verb. If I didn't know that thumped was a verb, don't guess, because it won't look particularly great on your answer. If you're not sure what it is, just say the use of the word thumped. If you do know it's a verb, then definitely use it. Okay, so if we look at that in a bit more detail, that little sentence, I've got my point here. the verb thumped, I've got my quote, thumped, and I've got my explanation of why the quote makes it scary. Okay, so let's look back at the actual abstract and the exam. There's our question again. Go back to the start of the video if you want to see it again. What I would always do with an extract is, when I get my extract, I've already read it by now because I've done question 1, I would zoom in on the language. So what I mean by that is look at little words, 1 word or 2 word phrases, zoom in on the language and pick 5 to 8 quotes with a highlighter that make the tightrope walk seem astonishing, dramatic. Trying to pick out 5 to 8 quotes. Okay, so ones I would pick out would be to show that it's astonishing and dramatic, this tightrope walk. So no one else in the world had done it. He was the first person to walk across Niagara Falls on a tightrope for more than 500 years. The churning water, thundering falls. So think of why the word churning, why those adjectives churning and thundering have been used. He was perched precariously over the raging waters below. A crowd of over 125 people had packed to see the historic performance. It's a once in a lifetime event. He ignored the first rule of tightrope and looked straight ahead, and he looked down, and it's a daredevil act. So I would say those are the best quotes, but there's probably loads more that tell me it's astonishing and dramatic. So I'm going to now analyse and try to do as many of those quotes as I can in 13 to 15 minutes. Okay, and this is the structure that I would generally use. I probably use this structure for the first PE I'm going to do in my answer, and then after that, each time just maybe list the quote and then explain why it's been used. So in the text, the writer makes it astonishing and dramatic, because that's the question, by using the phrase, shove my quote in, and then put this suggest, and then explain why that quote has been used by the writer, explain why it is astonishing and dramatic. So the first ones I'm going to examine are churning waters and thundering falls. So I think I'm going to zoom in on the adjective thundering and explain why the writer's used it, because the writer could have just put the churning water, the falls below, or the Niagara Falls, but he's chosen to use that word thundering. So what does thundering suggest? So I put in the text, the writer makes the walk astonishing and dramatic by using the phrase thundering falls. This suggests the falls are powerful, explosive and booming. This emphasises the danger Wallander is facing. Okay, so let's look into more detail. So my point is that the writer makes it astonishing and dramatic. I'm probably going to use that as sentence starter nearly every time I do a PE. Don't worry about sounding boring. It'll give a nice structure to your answers. By using the phrase thundering falls, that's my quote. And then my pink is my explanation and saying why is the quote being used and what are the connotations of the word. I put this suggests the falls are powerful, explosive and booming. This emphasises the danger. So there is my explanation of why the word or that phrase makes the walk seem astonishing and dramatic. Next one, a crowd of 125,000 people packed the roads. Okay, so what do we think about the word crowd? What does that suggest in our heads? 125,000 is a lot of people, and even the word packed suggests or people are almost crammed in. So my PE is, in the text, the writer, blah, 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 uses the phrase a crowd of over 125,000 people packed the roads. The huge amount of people waiting suggests it's going to be an amazing spectacle. Okay, so again, my point is also I forgot to say, if I wanted to add a bit more for that one, I've maybe talked about why the crowd and 125,000 people, I've talked about that. If I wanted to zoom into the word packed and say why that's been used, I could add another bit and say the verb packed suggests it's so busy people can barely move. But I wouldn't have to add that bit if I don't want to. First thing to note of this is it does what it says on the tin, it explains the question, but also it's only 2 sentences. The major way people do not do well on this question is, instead of doing paragraphs or sentences like this, answers like this, maybe doing 7 or 8 of these, they tend to pick 2 quotes and they do these huge PEs, which we don't need to do. Doing 7 or 8 of these will really get you the high grades. Okay, so again, there's my point. There's my quote, and then I've basically explained why has the writer decided to use that statistic. Well, he's used it because he's trying to say that it's such an amazing thing that people are crammed in to watch this person. If it would have said a crowd of over 10 people had gone to watch him, we're not really thinking it's particularly a great thing. But the fact that 125,000 people have gone suggests it's some kind of major event. Okay, so banned explanations in this question, this is where big massive thing where people go wrong, is instead of zooming into the quote, instead of doing the pink like we do here, explaining why, being specific, saying why are those 1 or 2 words, why are those being used, people who don't really know what they're doing tend to just go really general, and they would write something like blah 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 blah, here's my quote, and then they would say this makes the reader want to read on. This puts an image in the reader's mind. It makes it interesting for the reader. Okay, all of these will get you absolutely no mark, and the examiner will just give you a big fat 0. Okay, so you've got to just pick a word and say why is that word being used. These are all vague and could be made about any text. It's just a bit of a panic answer people do. So summary for this question. Focus on what happens and how the language has been used. Maybe try to start at least with the sentence start the writer uses for your first PE. Try some correct subject terminology, but definitely not all the time, okay? It's better not to use it at all if you don't really know what you're doing. So I would say if you're doing 5 to 6 PEs, maybe talk about subject terminology maybe once or twice. It's more important to explain why the words have been used. Main thing is explain why you've picked the quote and what the words mean for the reader in the question. Use as many examples and quotes as possible in 30 minutes. So a lot of my students get worried about, oh, I haven't done my 5 or 6 quotes. Don't think about it in terms of, I haven't done my 6 quotes. Just do as many quotes as you can in that 30 minutes. When the 13 minutes is up, you go on to the next question.